Okay, everybody, welcome to our community gathering. The topic of war is Koan. Like Billy Joel, like the old Billy Joel song, we didn't start the fire, but the world's been burning since the world's been turning. And it's not just here in the Middle East where I'm at. Obviously it is, but it's happening everywhere. There's a lot of polarization, a lot of conflict, we seem to be traumatizing the hell out of each other, with all of our conflicts. And I guess I suppose some of them are inevitable. We could see them coming for years in a way. But also many of them are avoidable. And when I say avoidable, it's just, if there was some adults in the room, sometimes you feel like, some calming energy, some present energy, things would go differently. I was saying before that this is, the topic, a bit of a challenging topic. We're gathering around the context of the Dharma. We're putting awareness, truth, wisdom, compassion in the center of our gathering. We organize around that as we meet with each other, and that's one. And we're doing that in Sangha, in a community. And what's beautiful about Sanghas is that we tend to it favors the co-regulation. But to really introduce this topic or to address this topic in a way that we feel like we grow or we get some benefit out of it, not just feeling like, oh, I found my people. There's some comfort to that, but also some benefit. We want it to be a bit frothy, not oppositional. That's something we want to take care that the context, the container here is really the priority, that we prioritize this context of the way we're gathering. And and we allow ourselves to feel the edges of this discussion because that's where the biggest opportunity and potential lies. It's also, in a way, the most precarious because that's where we get triggered and that's where we contract down into our beliefs, contract down into our points of view, contract down to our opinions, contract down to our kind of traumatic past, Something activates me from the past and it's like, we're off the rails suddenly. Should that happen, it's okay. Again, the container we're creating here is meant to be big enough to hold all that. So when this recent round of war kicked off with Iran and missiles flying everywhere, I'm just in a constant contemplation, in between the fear and the acting out and the blame and the feeling like a victim and wanting to victimize and all those, natural human reactions in between all of that stuff. But I often rest in this kind of contemplation of, how to face this. I have my opinions, I have my beliefs, I have my political orientations, I have, whatever, all that stuff. But my deeper question is always the spiritual question, how do we face this? The Yaqui Indian shaman, Don Juan, said that only a spiritual warrior can withstand the path of knowledge. And, when I hear the path of knowledge, I mean the path of truth. There's my truth, there's your truth, there's maybe our truth and my people's truth and your people's truth. And there's all these relative truths, but the path of knowledge is always unfolding, always winding, always opening up to some greater truths. It might be just including more and more perspectives, that our truth becomes our truths become more complex, perspectively speaking, or it could just be just that shift to, that spiritual shift to an absolute truth. Whatever the case may be, whether we're going for the divine where we all are one and, that which unites us is infinitely greater than anything that divides us. Oh my God. Just let that sink. This is a perennial spiritual truth. Really, if we all, that's enough to disarm the world, to just rest in the spiritual truth, in this kind of feeling that where we can access and connect, we together can access and connect with that which is greater. Oh my God, the world would really, it'd be so much more chill. One of the injunctions that we have from our spiritual practice, especially meditation, particularly meditation. One of the injunctions that we have is whatever arises in the course of your practice is your path. So where we find ourselves right now in this moment, that's our path. There's no judgment whatsoever when people polarize. I mean, that's kind of what happens. It happens before we even have the capacity to realize it's happening, to think about it. It's like before there's choice. It's not even to judge when somebody chooses to polarize it because it's just too painful to sit in that moral dilemma. It's just too much. No, it's much easier to say, oh, look how horrible they are. But to sit in that moral dilemma, there's really only one way to sit in that moral dilemma to where it still stays a moral, to where it still stays as a moral dilemma, as a dialectic, as in that tension, in that friction, which is almost unbearable. The only way to sit with that, the only way to sit with that, the only way to sit with that is to hold it as a koan. We could call it many different things. Yeah. A koan's a koan by any other name. A rose is a rose by any other name. But to really hold it, and what does a koan do? A koan sits in that dilemma, sits in that dialectic, but not in a sense of being a victim to it, but in a sense of being engaging it, letting it penetrate with all of its pain and unpleasantness, but also constantly learning from it. Only a spiritual warrior can withstand the path of knowledge. What is the moral dilemma that really is just almost unbearable to carry for you? It's basically a question, a dilemma, a riddle that can't be solved with the intellect, cannot be solved with the intellect. And the practice is to solve it with the intellect, but it can't be solved with the intellect. So you have to exhaust the dualistic thinking in a way. And you like the famous one of probably the most famous koan is what is the sound of one hand clapping? One hand that two hands I got. One hand clapping. My intellect can come up with really quickly comes up with three or four really clever answers. But no, 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 no. All those answers are wrong. If you're working with a Zen master, they just, they swat your answers down. And the exhausting of the intellect is meant to put you in that kind of that same space of a moral dilemma where something is cooking. That which is cooking is the smaller part of the self, is the part of us that is in full confrontation with the moral dilemma. It's not shutting it down, not avoiding it, not trying to control it. And again, God bless us all. No judgment for when we do that. But it can just sit and rest in that highly uncomfortable place that is appears to be unbearable. And yet when we take a deep breath and we center and ground and once more into the breach, little by little we realize that we can bear it. Rainer Maria Rilke, he has this beautiful in one of his books, I believe it was Letters to a Young Man was the name of the book. He writes about basically he's writing about koans, but he doesn't call it koans. It's just questions. And I'm just going to read the quote because when I first read this quote, I'd heard of Rilke. Oh my God. All the cool philosophers that I listened to would talk about Rilke, and it's like, oh, I got to check this guy out. And it's very touching, yeah, Rilke's work. And I was a young man when I first came across this quote, and it became like one of the many little compass points that I have in my own practice. And he was writing to a young man who had lots of questions about. I think the young man was wanting to become a writer or something like that. I'm not sure. He approached him as a mentor, and they had a correspondence, and he wrote them. So he says, "Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart." Just think of our moral dilemmas right now. Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answer. Isn't that interesting? Try to love the questions themselves. Don't seek the answer. So, in fully engage the question, fully engage the moral dilemma. But don't try to close it down with an answer, with a clever answer. Sorry, get back to Rilke. Try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms, like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. And perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. That's my favorite definition of a koan. War is a koan. So we have this war, and any levers of power that we grab a hold of to understand it, and it's fine doing that, you know. Any levers of power that we grab a hold of to explain it away or to justify it or to defend it or to condemn it, whatever the case may be. Um, it's not the koan. And the moral dilemma is really here as a spiritual warrior. Only a spiritual warrior can withstand the path of knowledge. As a meditator, as a practitioner, as a kind of vulnerable, raw, naked human being, so to speak, undefended, drop the armor. Yeah, from that place, we want to rest in these dilemmas and don't try to answer them. Or if you're trying to answer them 100 times a day, at least give a couple of minutes here and there where you're just not. You're just surrendering to the whole thing. And as Rilke says, then gradually, without noticing it, along some distant day, you will live into the answer. If we do that, when we do that, we cook, we grow. The yeast is frothy, our hearts soften, our edges expand. We have a little bit more space to listen to the other. We can take a deeper breath. Or if we're having a hard time breathing because it's all just too much, we have a little bit more compassion and patience for that. Let me finish off with this quote from Rainer Maria Rilke. So Rainer says, be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers, which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Rainer Maria Rilke. And war is a koan. Thank you, everybody.